In a city split by color lines and quiet violence, a black journalist and a white law student dare to fall in love when the world gives them every reason not to. Set against the backdrop of 1960s Chicago, where every sidewalk crack hides a warning and every glance could be a threat, their story is not just about love, but survival. In a time when loving each other means risking everything, Evelyn and Michael must decide. Is it better to be safe or to be free? Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through the city like a knife, slipping between buildings and dragging with it the sense of coffee, diesel, and rain-soaked pavement. Inside the University of Chicago's Grand Gothic Library, though, the world was quiet. Lamps glowed like candlelight over rows of mahogany tables, illuminating young minds hunched over books and papers, their rustling pages the only sound daring to interrupt the silence. Evelyn James sat at her usual spot by the tall window, the collar of her navy pea coat still damp from the morning drizzle. Her hair, tightly coiled and pinned at the nape of her neck, framed a face too serious for 21. A notebook lay open in front of her, filled with neat lines of handwritten notes for her feature on the rising tide of sit-ins across the South. She was supposed to be writing. Instead, her pen hovered, idle, as her eyes drifted across the reading room. That's when she saw him. Michael Gallagher had just stepped inside, shaking the rain from his jacket. Tall, fair-haired, and unmistakably out of place in this particular corner of the library, where the black students, though few, tended to congregate quietly to avoid stares and whispers. He didn't seem to notice the invisible lines carved through the space, or if he did, he didn't care. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told where he didn't belong. He was looking for a book. Faulkner, maybe, or Baldwin. Something literary and difficult, judging by the section he was headed toward. Evelyn turned her attention back to her notes, determined not to care. But when she glanced up again, he was standing directly across the table from her, scanning the shelf just behind her head. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low and unassuming. "Would you mind if I—" Evelyn shifted slightly, giving him room. "Help yourself," she said, her voice clipped. He nodded his thanks and reached past her, retrieving a worn copy of Go Tell It on the Mountain. He paused, glanced at the cover, then smiled faintly. "Read this one." "Twice," Evelyn replied, raising an eyebrow. He seemed surprised and a little impressed. "Good," he asked. "Essential," she said. And then, before she could stop herself, "But not for the reasons most white readers think." Michael blinked, but didn't flinch. "Would you tell me what those reasons are?" She studied him, looking for a smirk, a sneer, a challenge. Instead, she found curiosity, genuine and quiet. She gestured to the seat across from her. "You've got 20 minutes, she said. He smiled, sat down, and placed the book gently beside her notebook. They didn't speak loudly, just quiet exchanges about Baldwin, the power of words, the difference between pity and understanding. But something settled between them in those 20 minutes, something not yet love or even attraction. Just the realization that they were both searching for truth, maybe, or meaning. Or just a space in the world that didn't feel so narrow. When the library bell chimed the hour, Evelyn stood. "That's your 20, she said, sliding her notebook into her satchel. Michael stood too, suddenly unsure. "Will you be here tomorrow?" "I'm always here," she said. And then, with the ghost of a smile, "But not always this generous with my time." She turned and walked away. He watched her go, book in hand and heart strangely rattled. Outside, the rain began to fall again. But inside, something had shifted. Evelyn didn't believe in fairy tales. She knew better. A black girl from the South Side couldn't afford dreams built on clouds and promises. But still, something pulled her back to that library the next day. Earlier than usual, her favorite pen already inked and a copy of The Fire Next Time tucked beneath her arm like a shield. He was there. Michael was seated at the same table, reading as if the air weren't thick with the tension of being watched. Not by her, but by the others. The hushed glances. The long silences. A white man in a black student's corner of campus was as rare as snowfall in July, and just as unnatural in the eyes of those who noticed. Evelyn sat across from him without a word. He looked up, eyes warm. "You're early." "You're in my seat," she replied, but she didn't ask him to move. Over the weeks that followed, it became a quiet routine. They studied separately, but their conversations always found a way back, floating over discussions of literature, politics, and family. She told him about her mother's garden and the way her father hummed gospel songs when he shaved. He spoke of his brother in seminary, his Catholic guilt, and how he felt like law school was a cage made of other people's expectations. But outside that sacred space, reality pressed in. The first time they walked together beyond the campus gates, it was accidental. A shared route to the train station. She wore gloves and kept her hands at her sides. He walked half a pace behind her, as if unsure of the right distance. People stared. Some frowned. A woman crossed the street to avoid them. A man muttered something under his breath that Evelyn didn't catch, but Michael did. She heard the way his breath hitched, how his jaw tensed. He said nothing. Neither did she. Later, sitting side by side on a bench near Washington Park, he broke the silence. "Does it always feel like this?" She didn't look at him when she answered. "It always feels worse when you pretend not to notice." He nodded slowly. "Then I won't pretend." It was the first thing that made her believe he might understand. And yet, even understanding couldn't soften the edges of the world they lived in. Her best friend warned her to be careful. "You think folks won't come for you because you're educated? They'll come harder. They'll say you asked for it." Michael's law school peers began to notice too. One, a loudmouthed son of a state senator, made a joke in class about jungle fever. Michael's pen snapped in his hand. Evelyn told him not to start a fight over her. "You think staying silent isn't a fight?" he asked her. She didn't have an answer for that. But she had questions. Why was she doing this? Was it real, or was it foolishness, drawn out by poetry and pretty eyes? Her mother had told her once, "Love is good. But it can't shield you from the world's anger." Evelyn was starting to feel that anger in every glance, every whisper. And still they kept walking those roads. After dark, in alleys near Hyde Park, they would meet like fugitives, talking, laughing, sometimes just sitting in silence. She let herself smile more when he was near, though she didn't always know why. One night, beneath the dim glow of a street lamp, Michael took her hand. It wasn't a grand gesture or a kiss or a pledge. Just fingers brushing fingers. Skin against skin. Fragile, tender, defiant. Evelyn didn't pull away. The world would not give them space, so they carved out their own, one step at a time, on roads not meant for them. And though fear followed every footstep, so did something stronger. Hope. Winter crept into Chicago with hard winds and a biting cold that settled deep into the bones. The city felt harsher in February, less forgiving, more watchful. Even the streetcars seemed to move with a kind of suspicion, their wheels screeching against the tracks like warning cries. Michael and Evelyn had grown bolder by then. Not reckless, but tired of shadows. They began meeting during daylight, walking along the lakefront, sometimes daring to sit side by side at a downtown diner where the waitress never smiled at either of them. When Evelyn took Michael to a black-owned bookstore on 47th Street, the owner raised an eyebrow but said nothing. There were nods, quiet questions. Michael handled them with quiet dignity. Evelyn watched. Always watching. Then came the night everything cracked. It was a Friday, just after a poetry reading on campus. Michael had offered to walk her to the station, his fingers brushing hers like always. She just laughed, softly, joyfully. And in that brief moment, they forgot the world was watching. They didn't notice the figure leaning against the brick wall across the street. Not until it stepped into the light and said Michael's name. It was his brother, Patrick Gallagher. Tall, stone-faced, dressed in a long black overcoat like he'd stepped out of a courtroom drama. Evelyn's heart stopped. Patrick looked between them, his eyes flat. "Is this a joke?" Michael didn't flinch. "No." "Then what the hell is it?" Evelyn took a breath and stepped forward. "I'm Evelyn." Patrick didn't acknowledge her. "Do you know what you're doing, Mike? To our family? To Dad?" Michael's jaw tightened. "I'm doing what's right." "No," Patrick said, voice rising. "You're humiliating us. You want to throw away everything for this?" Evelyn didn't wait for Michael to defend her. "If this is how your family sees me," she said coolly, "you were never holding much to begin with." Patrick's lip curled. Don't talk to me about holding things. You think love's enough to carry you through when people spit on you in the street? When doors slam in your face? Michael stepped between them. That's already happening. We're still here. Patrick stared at him, breathing hard. Then he turned and walked away, leaving silence behind like broken glass. But it wasn't over. That weekend, Michael was summoned to the Gallagher home. His father, Judge Thomas Gallagher, didn't shout. He didn't have to. He simply informed Michael that the family's financial support would end. No tuition. No rent. No inheritance. You've made a choice, he said, swirling scotch in a heavy glass. Now live with it. Michael did. He found a job at a legal aid office, clerking during the day, studying by night. Evelyn offered to help, but he refused, not out of pride but principle. You didn't ask for this, he said. I didn't, she replied. But I chose it anyway. Still, her life was shifting too. Her editor at the campus paper quietly pulled her from high-profile pieces. She overheard whispers in the newsroom. She's bringing too much attention. She submitted an essay on interracial justice. It was rejected with a red note, too personal. Try something more objective. One afternoon, a brick shattered the front window of her apartment. No note. No words. Just the sound of glass splintering across the floor. Evelyn swept it up in silence. The fog had settled in around them, thick and choking. But inside that fog, the fire burned brighter. They found each other at night not just for comfort, but for survival. Michael would read her poems he had never dared write before. Evelyn would sit beside him and speak dreams out loud she'd never shared with anyone. They made love not as rebellion, but as reclamation. Of space. Of freedom. Of the right to feel joy in a world that told them joy was not theirs. One night, wrapped in an old quilt, Evelyn whispered into Michael's neck. Do you think it's worth it? He didn't answer right away. Just pulled her closer, lips brushing her hair. Yes, he said. Even if it ends tomorrow. But it didn't end. Not yet. And not without a fight. The thaw of spring brought no warmth. Snow melted, but something colder had settled between Evelyn and Michael. Something heavy and unnamed, born not from absence of love, but from the weight of the world pressing in from all sides. They still saw each other, but less, and never without tension clawing at the edges. Evelyn's work with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee had intensified. Every week she attended meetings, typed flyers, and trained new volunteers on how to stay calm when faced with hatred. You don't flinch, she would say. Not when they shout. Not when they spit. If they see fear, they've already won. Michael didn't argue with her passion, but he feared for her. He began urging caution, first gently, then more urgently. You don't have to be on the front lines, Evelyn, he said one night, his voice tight. You write. You teach. That's power, too. You think I don't know that, she snapped. You think I want to be screamed at? To risk arrest every time I show my face. Then why? Because I can't afford to wait for you to change the law, Michael. I have to survive the now. That night, they parted without touching. And still, the world kept turning. Michael was drowning in school and his job. His former friends had all but abandoned him. His professors, once generous with advice, now looked past him in the hallway. At the legal aid office, he was passed over for a fellowship, no explanation given. Evelyn's life didn't fare better. Her landlord began asking intrusive questions. Her pastor, once her family's greatest supporter, pulled her aside after service. People are talking, Evelyn. Your name's becoming a distraction. She didn't respond, just walked home, Bible pressed to her chest like a shield she no longer believed in. The final blow came quietly. Michael had applied for a summer internship with a civil rights law firm based in Atlanta. It was competitive, but he'd made the shortlist. He called Evelyn the night he found out. They said yes, he breathed, breathless with hope. I leave in June. I want you to come with me. The silence on the line was deep and slow. I can't, she said finally. You know I can't. Why not? Because my fight is here. My voice is here. I've bled too much into this city to walk away from it. Evelyn, he hesitated. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Not anymore. Her reply came like a blade. I'm not proving anything. I'm living. You want to escape it. I want to change it. He didn't speak again. Neither did she. In the days that followed, their calls dwindled. No dramatic farewell, no slammed doors or sobbed confessions. Just fewer words. Quieter nights. A silence that grew like ivy, choking out the light. When June came, Michael left. No goodbye. Evelyn didn't go to the train station. She couldn't. Instead, she sat at the park bench where they once read Baldwin and argued over Dubois. The wind smelled like rain again. She wrote a letter that night, for pages handwritten, sealed with care. But she never mailed it. She placed it in a box of old flyers and stashed it beneath her bed. Some things, she told herself, weren't meant to be saved. But she was wrong. Some things just weren't done yet. The summer moved like smoke, heavy, slow, and full of ghosts. Evelyn poured herself into the movement. Days bled into nights of protest planning, speechwriting, and long walks through neighborhoods where the sidewalks cracked under the weight of broken promises. Her hands bore ink stains, her voice grew hoarse, but she didn't stop. Couldn't. If she paused too long, the ache in her chest would swell. Too wide, too loud. That ache had a name. She didn't speak it. In Atlanta, Michael woke before dawn each day to stacks of case files and the hum of change humming beneath the surface of Southern soil. He met women who'd lost sons to police violence, teenagers jailed for sitting at lunch counters, men who'd never been given a fair trial. He listened, learned, argued. But at night, when the noise fell away, his thoughts wandered north. To a woman with fire in her words and steel in her spine. He didn't know why he'd left without a goodbye. Pride, maybe. Or fear of hearing, "Don't go," and not being strong enough to leave. A month passed. Then two. And on a blazing August morning, Evelyn stood in the thick of the crowd in Washington, D.C. She had come with a group of organizers, armed with clipboards and chants. But when the speeches began, she drifted to the edges of the reflecting pool. She stood alone, sweat beading on her brow, her heart clenched against the sound of 1,000 voices crying freedom. Then she saw him. Across the water. In the crowd. The pale blur of his face, the slope of his shoulders. Michael. She didn't wave. Didn't call out. But he looked up and saw her. For one eternal second, they simply stood, oceans of bodies between them, nothing said, everything known. She left before the speeches ended. Back in Chicago, Evelyn pulled out the letter. Smoothed it open with trembling hands. Michael. I'm angry with you. I want to hate you. But I can't, because when I close my eyes, I hear your voice reading Baldwin like scripture, and I remember how the world felt less cruel with you near. You left without a word. Maybe because you thought it would hurt less. It didn't. Still, I miss you. I wish that didn't matter. But it does. She placed the letter in a fresh envelope. Addressed it. But again, did not send it. Across the country, Michael was doing the same. Evelyn, I've met people here who remind me of you. Fighters. Dreamers. But none of them are you. I came here thinking I was running toward something. But now I wonder if I was just running away from you. I'm sorry I left. I didn't know how to stay. I still don't know if I'm brave enough. But I think about you every damn day. He folded the letter, tucked it into a copy of Go Tell It on the Mountain, then set it on the nightstand, unopened, untouched. Months passed. Evelyn published an editorial in a major paper. The first time her name appeared beside her words on a national page. Michael saw it, clipped it, saved it. Evelyn heard from a friend that Michael was helping defend protesters arrested in Birmingham. She nodded, said nothing. Two lives moving forward, building separately, but always circling back to the same truth. Some letters don't need to be sent. Some stories keep writing themselves, even when the ink runs dry. Autumn returned with a kind of reluctant grace, painting the city in gold and rust, as if trying to soften what had hardened over the past year. Evelyn walked the streets with sharper steps now, older, wiser, still burning. Her name had begun to matter in activist circles, not just as a speaker, but as a writer. Her op-eds were finding traction. People were listening, but the weight hadn't lessened. If anything, it pressed deeper. The arrests had been coming faster. Protests were growing louder. And Evelyn had started training younger girls, fresh from college, full of passion, unaware of the price. She taught them what she had learned in silence. How to hold your head when a white man calls you girl. How to smile without folding. How to write as if your words could split stone. Then came the rally on the west side. The police arrived earlier than usual. They weren't asking questions. Just shoving, cuffing, dragging people into vans. Evelyn didn't run. She had a copy of the Constitution in one hand and a notebook in the other. A photojournalist caught the moment they slammed her to the ground, the paper torn, her wrist bent at an unnatural angle. She didn't cry out, not even when they pushed her into the back seat. She spent the night in a holding cell that reeked of bleach and fear, surrounded by women whispering prayers and threats in the same breath. At dawn, her name was called. She stood and froze. Michael Gallagher stood across the room, in a worn suit, tie askew, holding a clipboard. His hair was longer. His eyes were tired. But it was him. She didn't speak. Neither did he. But as he led her out and down the hallway toward a quiet interview room, her chest threatened to cave in. When the door closed, he spoke first. I didn't know it was you. Until they called your name. Evelyn sat slowly. What are you doing here? Legal aid. They rotate us through city arrests. I've been back in Chicago 2 weeks. She looked at his hands. They were trembling. He sat across from her. They said you resisted. That true? She gave him a smile like smoke. Does existing count? He laughed, short and quiet. Then silence settled between them, thick and familiar. You broke your wrist, he said gently, reaching across the table, but not touching. It's not the worst break I've had this year. He flinched at that, and then she softened. I saw you, she said. In D.C. I saw you too. Why didn't you come over? I didn't deserve to. The room hummed with the unsaid. Finally, Evelyn looked him in the eyes. Why are you really back? Michael took a breath, like diving. Because every time I helped someone down there, I heard your voice. Because every time I opened a book, I saw your handwriting in the margins. Because every day I was gone, I thought maybe I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Tears rose, but didn't fall. She had long since learned how to hold them back. You don't get to walk in here and rewrite the past, she said. I know, he whispered. But maybe we can still write what comes next. A long pause. Then, softly, did you get my letter? She shook her head. I wrote one too. They looked at each other. And for the first time in over a year, Evelyn reached for his hand. I'm still angry, she said. So am I. But I'm tired of fighting alone. He nodded, fingers tightening around hers. Then don't. And in that sterile room, under buzzing fluorescent lights, and between bruises and broken things, they began again. Not in secret. Not in shame. But together. On purpose. There was no parade, no welcome banner when Evelyn and Michael stepped out of that courtroom together. Just the usual. Narrowed eyes from strangers, veiled looks from colleagues, and the silence of old friends who'd chosen their own comfort over conviction. But this time, Evelyn didn't shrink from it. Neither did Michael. They weren't interested in blending in anymore. The first public test came a week later at a community town hall in Bronzeville. Evelyn was scheduled to speak about redlining and housing discrimination, a subject she'd written about for months, but had never addressed on a stage this size. She wore a soft brown dress and a scarf wrapped high around her hair, and as she stepped up to the podium, Michael stood at the back of the church-turned-meeting hall, silent but present. Some people noticed him. Some walked out. But Evelyn didn't falter. I'm not here to soothe anyone, she said, voice clear, unshaken. I'm here to say what needs saying. We deserve to live in the neighborhoods we built. We deserve dignity without asking permission. And we deserve love, unconditional, unapologetic, and unafraid. Later, in the parking lot, a man approached her. Middle-aged, salt in his beard, a clipboard under his arm. You made your point, he said. But walking around with him? That's asking for trouble. Michael stepped forward, his mouth opening. But Evelyn stopped him with a hand. I've been in trouble since the day I was born, she said. He just decided to stand in it with me. The man didn't answer. He left instead. They got used to that, people leaving. But others stayed. Michael took a job with a non-profit legal collective that focused on racial justice. His knowledge of the system, and his refusal to weaponize it, won him respect slowly. There were still doors that wouldn't open. Clients who refused to meet with him. Judges who mispronounced his name when they recognized hers on court documents. Still, he stayed. They moved into a small apartment above a diner on South Cottage Grove. Their first home. The wallpaper peeled in corners and the pipes knocked like ghosts at night, but it was theirs. Evelyn filled the walls with books, protest posters, and the scent of cornbread when she had time to cook. Michael fixed the windows that never quite sealed. Once, while painting the living room, she turned to him and said, "Can you believe we made it this far?" He looked at her, paint in his hair, light in her eyes, and said, "No, but I'm glad we did." But not all battles were public. The private ones cut deeper. There were days Evelyn couldn't write, the words swallowed by exhaustion. Nights when Michael woke from dreams of his father's voice, cold and final. "You are no son of mine." There were arguments about risk, about legacy, about raising children one day in a world that might hate their faces. But there was also laughter, and dancing barefoot in the kitchen to Sam Cooke records, and long, slow Sunday mornings when the world fell away, and all that remained was the quiet knowledge. They had chosen each other. Over fear, over comfort, over silence. One night, after Evelyn finished a reading of her essay collection at a bookstore packed wall to wall, an older woman approached her. "I was wrong," the woman said, her hand soft and trembling as it rested on Evelyn's shoulder. "About you. About him. I didn't think it could work." Evelyn smiled. Not bitterly. Not triumphantly. Just truthfully. "It doesn't always," she said. "But that doesn't mean it shouldn't. And maybe that was what this life was. Not perfect, not even safe, but defiant in its refusal to be erased." Together, they were a seam stitched against the grain of everything they'd been told. And the seam was holding. By the time the city finally caught up to the love Evelyn and Michael had dared to live, the fight had already changed them, and the world around them. It was 1972 now. A decade had passed since that first glance in the library, and the landscape of Chicago was different. Still bruised, still divided, but different. There were new voices in the papers, new marches, new laws, some written in blood, others in ballots. The movement had grown, reshaped, bent with time. So had they. Evelyn stood on the steps of the South Side Cultural Center, her arm wrapped around her daughter, little Nora, 5 years old and fierce-eyed. The girl tugged impatiently at the hem of her coat, eager to get to the park down the block. Michael stood beside them, salt now peppering his beard, reading a flyer for Evelyn's latest speaking engagement. Her name was in bold letters. "You've got a full house again," he said. She shrugged. "I say the same things I always have." He smiled. "The difference is they're finally listening." They walked together, Nora skipping ahead, her laughter echoing between brick buildings. It was the same neighborhood where Evelyn had once walked in fear. Now people nodded to her in passing, recognition, respect. Not universal, not without its shadows, but real. A man approached them on the sidewalk, mid-50s, wearing a postman's uniform. "You Evelyn James?" he asked. She nodded cautiously. "My wife clipped your article in the Tribune last week," he said. "We put it on the fridge." Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you," she said quietly. Michael reached for her hand. She let him take it. Later that afternoon, the three of them sat beneath an oak tree in the same park where she and Michael had once dared to hold hands after dark, risking everything. Nora ran circles around them with a plastic pinwheel, shrieking joy into the wind. The sky above was wide and clean, the air smelling faintly of fried onions and blooming lilacs. Evelyn rested her head on Michael's shoulder. "Do you think we changed anything?" He glanced at her. "No." She looked up sharply. He smiled. "I think we changed everything." She laughed, shaking her head. Modest as ever. "It's not modesty," he said. "It's the truth." Evelyn leaned back, gazing at the horizon. In the distance, sirens wailed faintly, a reminder that the world hadn't fixed itself. Not completely. Maybe never would. But she wasn't afraid of it anymore. They had lost friends, family, opportunities. There were still doors that would never open for them, still voices that called them wrong. But they had built a life inside the cracks. Strong, rooted. And they had Nora, living proof that love could bloom in hostile soil. The wind picked up, and the pinwheel spun fast in their daughter's hand. She ran toward them, cheeks flushed with joy. "Mommy, look," she shouted. "It's flying." Evelyn reached out for her, pulled her close, and whispered, "So are we, baby. So are we." And beneath that sky, on the ground they once feared would never hold them, they remained. Unbroken, unapologetic, unshaken.